Afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the Chattanooga County Regional Planning Commission meeting this afternoon. So my name is Todd Lehman. I will be chairing the meeting today. I serve as vice chair, so hopefully we can work through this. I'm going to ask a lot of Mr. Schultz and Mr. Reuter. A few announcements. Planning Commission gets this packet about a week ago. So some of the discussion, if there's a staff recommendation to approve and there's not any opposition, may go quick. So I'll read the case. So make sure that you're aware of the case that's being presented. I'll ask if there's any opposition. I'll also ask if the applicant's present, depending on whether there's approval with conditions. So listen for the case number. I believe they'll show up on the screen. So if there's a case that you're interested in speaking either for or in opposition, when I read the case, I'll ask, is there anyone here that's in opposition that would like to speak? And if you would raise your hand, I would ask that you, at that point, move over to this wall. We run typically, if there's an issue either with an approval and condition or a denial, staff will go through a presentation, and then the applicant on the case will have 7 minutes to discuss and present. After they present that 7 minutes, opposition will have 9 minutes. And so it's very important that I understand how many people there are and that you're aware. If there's a number of people that want to speak, I would ask that you talk about, maybe if the person in front of you is talking about one particular concern, again, we're looking at a 9-minute time, and if there's other people that you maybe focus your comments, you can reiterate, but then focus your comments on maybe some other concerns, just so the Planning Commission will hear. I will say that all the discussion is between who's at the podium and the planning commissioners. There's not discussion that goes on from the podium to the public or staff. So I want to make sure you're aware of that. Once the opposition speaks for 9 minutes, the applicant will have 2 minutes of rebuttal, and then typically that's followed by questions or comments. And then there will be motions and seconds and then votes. Other than plats stop here at Planning Commission. Any of the rezoning applications and the rezoning cases that are heard here will go on either to County Commission or City Council. If they're in the city of Chattanooga, they'll go to City Council. Obviously, if they're unincorporated. We do have a point at the end of the meeting for public comment. If there's anybody that wants to make any public comment, non-related item, there is a time there. Mr. Schultz, did I forget anything?
No, I think you covered everything.
Okay. I did not have a cheat sheet, so I usually have a cheat sheet. So thank you. So we're going to go ahead and move in. And again, I ask that you follow this, and we'll start out with subdivision and plats, and we'll start our first subdivision plat. Case SD 2023-0023. It's a final plat for watercolor subdivision. Lots 1 through 121 has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition to this plat? Seeing none. I have a motion to approve. It has been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Second subdivision plat is SD 2023-0024. It's a preliminary plat for Hawks Landing, lots 1 through 68. As a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition, audience? Okay, I have a motion to approve. It has been seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3 under subdivision plats is SD 2023-0025. It's a final plat. The Pomeroy lots 1 through 95 has a staff recommendation to approve. Any Comments, opposition? Seeing none. Okay. I have a motion to approve. It has been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Subdivision plat item number 4, SD 2023-0026. It's a final plat. Mercedes subdivisions, lots 1 through 6, has a staff recommendation to approve. Any opposition? I have a motion to approve. Okay. Mr. Price.
Thank you. Mike Price, MAP Engineers. So the request before you is a private road that has been in existence since at least the 60s. And most of these lots, as you would come in off of Highway 58, which if you look on the screen would be on the right, have been recorded since the 50s. So my client looked at purchasing and did the properties that are here, and he's looking at building homes. So the private drive in existence had no fire hydrant, no sort of fire access that had been provided. So we developed a plan and we submitted that to the fire marshal. And I have an email from Michael Brooks saying that if the changes where we added 26 feet of pavement to provide turn-bys create two-way traffic in certain areas, And if we added the fire hydrants, which is what we did, they were perfectly fine with the plan. And here's that email. I would further state that in order to comply, what one would have to do is put in a 25-foot flag lot coming in off of Highway 58 and extend it some 900 plus feet to get to the lot that would be on the right of the screen as you look at it, which if you think about it from an access standpoint, that makes no sense and you're encumbering another lot. So when you look at the requirements as it relates to why to grant variances, unusual physical or other conditions which exist or would create practical difficulty, you're creating a length of road that's longer than the current driveway, and it wouldn't have a fire hydrant on it. So that is an impractical approach in terms of trying to subdivide a property in requiring a flag lot. Secondly, the granting of the variance would not be detrimental to the public interest. Well, the fire marshal has already said that if we made the changes that we did, he was fine with it. So that being the case, it's not detrimental to the public interest as we're meeting what the emergency services would require. Thirdly, or I would point out that the deviation from the standard is consistent with adopted plans and principles for the area. The two lots that we're talking about creating are far larger than the existing lots that are there. So we're not creating anything less conforming today than what consistently is out there now. So given that, we would ask that the variance be granted given the improvements that the client has made, and that this is no less conforming than what is out there currently. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Questions? Mr. May.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Price, so I want to make sure I understand what you're doing here. This is currently one large lot that you're trying to put into two.
Correct.
Into two.
Yes, sir.
And you may have mentioned this, but is there not enough road frontage on 58 for a flag?
You can put a flag coming off of Highway 58. However, that flag would be impractical as you would be hugging the southern property line to get to that lot on the far right. Because you're not going to want to encumber the lot that would be closest and actually touches 58 that's proposed to be created.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Price.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Residential zone to RTZ, residential townhouse zero lot line zone, as a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition to this case? Let me just make sure, is the applicant present? Okay. I have a motion to approve with conditions has been seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item number 4, case number 2023-0100. It's 2 unaddressed properties in the 8900 block of Highway 58. It's to rezone from R2A Rural Residential District, A1 Agricultural District, and R5 Single Wide Manufactured Home District to M2 Warehouse and Wholesale District. Has a staff recommendation to deny. Is the applicant present? Okay, is there any opposition? Okay. Mr. Schultz, if you'll.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, we did receive several emails in opposition, and they're in your Google's spreadsheet that's in front of you, that opposition. This is case 2023-100. This is a request to rezone from A1 Agriculture District, R2A Rural Residential District, and R5 Single Wide Manufactured Home District to M2 Wholesale and Light Industrial District. Proposed use of self-storage warehouse. It's roughly 6.5 acres. Looking at the zoning map, there is no manufacturing zone in this vicinity. Abutting to the north is A1 and R2A. To the east of this property is A1. To the south, abutting this property is A1 and R2A. And to the west is C3. And you do have some R2 along Highway 58. But just looking at the general vicinity map here, you see no manufacturing zoning at this location. There is no zoning history on this site. 1986, across the street, that was rezoned from R2A to C3. Staff recommended to deny, but ultimately it was approved by County Commission. In 1988, to the southwest of the site, that was rezoned from R2A to C2. Then roughly 2 miles down the street, there was some property that was rezoned from 84 from A1 and R2A to M2. Staff recommended deny back in '84, was approved by County Commission. This is a vacant piece of property. It looked like it's been cleared for borrowing land and dirt. To the north is single unit residential. To the northeast is the institutional school. To the south is vacant land, agriculture uses to the east. To the south along Banther Lane, you have 2-unit residential and single unit residential. And to the west, the property abutting Highway 58 is commercial, and further west is single unit residential. Here's a view of the site from Highway 58. Another view of the site with the entrance into the site. Another view of the site from Highway 58. This is looking north on Highway 58, the site's on your right-hand side. This is looking south on Highway 58, the site's on the left-hand side with the entrance here with the dirt or the gravel. This is southwest of the site, the commercial. And this is west of the site, some of the commercial uses. And then another view looking at Highway 58. This property is in the Wolf River Creek area plan, which was adopted in 2007. The plan recommendation was low intensity residential, or the plan goals of being single family attached housing. Townhouses and other attached units may be acceptable as a PUD. Developments are encouraged to retain a natural buffer to separate the perimeter of the site from adjacent exterior roadways. As you can see in the plan, it does not support commercial or manufacturing uses at this location. It's primarily low intensity residential. Closer view of that plan recommendation. It's in the circle of this area, and it's again low intensity residential. The request is not compatible with adopted Wolf River Creek plan. It would not be compatible with surrounding land uses or development form. The M2 district will introduce incompatible land uses to the area. The current adopted policy guide on appropriate development forms and density in the Highway 58 is over 16 years old. However, it's still acceptable. We still use that plan. Hamilton County is also in the process of creating new area plans for the county, which may provide updated guidance on, future land uses at this location. Based on all those three of not complying with the current plan, future plan coming on board in a couple months, staff recommends to deny this request.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff? Yes, Commissioner Hyland.
I'm very familiar with that area. There have been quite a few wrecks coming out of that area of Mahan Gap and Career Lane, just slightly north of that. And it would, if you looked at the traffic study of that and the feasibility of entering Highway 58, especially going southbound off that area. If you looked at that.
Traffic?
Yes, sir.
No, we did not. It's part of our zoning case. If development moves forward, they'll most likely have to do a traffic study.
They'll have to get a driveway permit from TDOT.
Yeah. It's going to be a rough area getting in and out of 58 there. Also, would commercial zoning be appropriate there, or do you have to go to manufacturing?
It would not allow the mini warehouses in commercial zoning.
Okay.
Even at that, the plan only supports low intensity residential. Most likely would not support commercial at that location either.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Brian, can you give me a count if it was to be developed under the current plan and current zoning? How many residents could possibly be coming in and out of there versus, I don't know, we have no idea what storage would bring, but
this would be a gross number.
gross is fine.
Roughly 40.
Okay. Thank you.
That's on 7,500 square foot. It's
Understood.
zoned A1. So it's a mixture of zones. A1 will limit you to 2 dwelling units on a portion of it. So it'd be max would be 40 based on R1.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
I want to
Yes.
briefly, I guess, I think what the council was referring to is the number of cars coming out. There's a lot of difference in a car coming out in a large vehicle being pulled in and out across Highway 58. That's what I'm thinking of. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for staff? And, okay, great. Were there just 2 that want to speak in opposition? Okay. Well, applicant will have 7, and then y'all have an opportunity. Mr. Price.
Thank you. So this is a unique piece of property located here on Highway 58. Over the course of the last 5 years, thereabouts, it has been used as a borrow pit. And so construction trucks have been pulling in and out on Highway 58 during that course of time. And to my knowledge, there haven't been any accidents or wrecks Uh, Almost doesn't count though. But nonetheless, you do have the site has been used as a borrow pit. And so what's happened over the years is that this site has taken down in elevation. And so this particular location is such that from Highway 58, with what we're proposing, the closest building to the edge of pavement would be some 200 feet away. It's also, based upon the pictures, Brian, that you were showing as it relates to what you see in the front, it's all heavily wooded. We don't have any plans to take that out. We would simply utilize the driveway as it currently exists. There is no median break on Highway 58 at this location, so you don't have to worry about left turn movements as it relates again to safety. So it's essentially going to function as a ride in and a ride out. Based on the elevations that we've taken down in through here, our property resident, our neighbor to the north, we're some 17 feet below his home. The property to the south, there's approximately about 40 feet in elevation between his property and where we would be located. I would also point out that the closest property, our neighbor to the north, is 380 feet. That's the closest property. That's our closest resident. Behind us is a school. To the south of us, the closest residential property currently exists today to any particular building is 630 feet away. So we really don't have neighbors, if you will, in the truest sense of the word. We're isolated here. So what we looked at doing then was creating a evergreen buffer that would be running around the perimeter. We have talked to the neighbors to the south and to the east of us, and they don't have any objection to it. We did try to reach out to the property owner to the north. We've not been successful to talk with him at this point, but we have made the effort. So what we have here is a site that essentially can be tucked in, hidden away from everybody else, and would not create any more disturbances than what's been going on for the course of the last 5 years. The uses are low impact as it relates to many warehouses. And then also the grading contractor would like to be able to put his operation in place towards the back of the property. It's very similar in many ways to the one that we did for McDaniel and Son here that's to the north of this site, about 3.5, 4 miles. We do have an M2 zone that's just to the south of us, about 2,300 feet. So it's not incongruent as it relates to other uses. But again, this one will be hidden. You won't see it from 58. You won't see it from the surrounding residential properties. That's what makes it unique. Typically an M zone is sticking out and it's blaring horns, and it's where it's sort of there where you cannot hide it. Because of the grading operations and the work that's been taking place over the course of the last 5 years, the way that it's located in here, what you will see is simply an evergreen hedge, trees, vegetation. You won't see the operation. So based on that, I understand staff recommendation because it doesn't meet a 16-year-old plan. I get that. But given what the use is and how we've strategically have graded this site to get to the point where we are now, I think this is an appropriate use based on that. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
I will. I do take a little bit of offense when you say almost. It's not. When I walk down carrying grandchildren because the truck pulls right in front of me, that is a problem. But thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Just your name and address, and got 9 minutes collectively. Thank you.
Kim Helton, 8618 Snow Hill Road. It's not necessarily the self-storage that we would be against. It's the manufacturing zone, which would create a precedent. And it always, when something gets zoned manufacturing or any other zone, usually it's used to get more of that same zone. And what you can't really see is the left turn lane to the Family Dollar General that's straight across from this property. And if you look at Google Aero Maps, you can see where the dump trucks have come all the way across both lanes and across the white lane. I mean, it's just right there glaring on the Google Maps, the dirt trail. And so that's very dangerous. And to turn right, there's not really another dedicated U-turn area on up the highway at all. And then it goes down to 2 lanes. So how are these people going to turn around? It is, are there boats going to be stored there? Will be manufacturing equipment? Exactly what is going to be stored there? We didn't get a community meetings, even though we asked, so we don't know. If you're having large vehicles that are turning right and then they need to get U-turn back to the left, Where's that going to take place? How's that going to happen? And it's so dangerous through there. There's many wrecks at the Birchwood Pike intersection, Career Lane, and Mayhem Gap. They're all really bad intersections. So those are some of the concerns. And just if it is, if you, even though the Tennessee code says once you pass a plan, you must be consistent with it. If it is going to be zoned manufacturing anyway, at least put stipulations that this is the only thing that can be built, so that in the future, when someone else buys this property, they can't use it for something else. It allowed it in manufacturing, and someone else can't say, oh, well, you allowed manufacturing here, but it was just for self-storage. So that would help keep someone else from jumping off of that manufacturing zone to zone for something that's not necessarily appropriate, especially with the school being adjacent to the school property. Manufacturing would not be appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleen Kirk, 11937 Crestwood Trail, Harrison, Tennessee. Quite honestly, Brian has said a lot of what I was going to say, as has Dr. Highlander, about the traffic and fears. And then Kim shared a lot about really the concern being this is outside of the Woodford plan, as well as what we're trying to plan for this area moving forward. It is meant to be primarily a residential area. We'd like to keep it that way. Primarily, the fear, again, is not the self-storage, but once it is manufacturing, kind of what we've already seen a little bit here today, where someone says, well, but we already had a variance. We already had a precedent. The second this becomes manufacturing, it doesn't stop anyone from up and down Highway 58 nearby, even though it's against the previous plans to go to manufacturing. So we just don't want to set a precedent at this time. And then, as Kim mentioned, quite frankly, another self-storage just opened up over in Bradley County, which is only about 6 miles away from here. And if this self-storage closes because they can't compete with them, and there's a lot of single-family houses here, so not quite sure where the self-storage is going to be or who's going to utilize it, what's going to stop somebody else with a light manufacturing from coming in? So if you do decide to approve, please do put that condition that it has to remain only self-storage and it has to keep the buffer and be away. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions? Or any? Okay. Mr. Price.
Thank you. So as it relates to the proposed use, we would be willing to condition it just for self-storage as well as for a contractor's operation, general contractor operation. There's no intent to creating sort of manufacturing operation processes or anything else here on the property. And again, given that it is so heavily screened and so far away from the neighbors with what is out here in this area, this operation could exist the way that it has been existing as a borrow pit for these many years without any complaints to my knowledge. And I would also point out that if you did look at doing residential construction, it would generate far, far more traffic than what we're proposing here. So I think that even though it doesn't fit the Wolf-Tiber plan, there's enough extenuating circumstances as it relates to how it sits in relation to its neighbors and how we've graded it in such a way as to create the proper buffers that ameliorate any sort of impacts to the residents of the area. If there's any questions, be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
this is storage buildings, things like that, self-storage. I think we've mentioned this before. We need another tool. Calling this industrial manufacturing, it just scares everybody to death. And the self-storage is not that. We do this all the time, and we get a lot of people out because of that reason. I think it's a good fit for the area with the condition that Mr. Price just mentioned. Move to approve.
Sorry. Have a motion to approve with two conditions, correct? Self-storage, general contractor's yard, and a required buffer that has been seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Yes, sir.
Brian, would the new plan that we're looking at for the area And as the gentleman mentioned, and I think it's a good idea that we're looking at a redistricting. Will that possibly take care of this with the new work that RPA is doing for each district?
Well, I'll let Dan elaborate further, but the new plan could come in and offer more guidance to a public hearing, public policy that we think this area either should remain low intensity residential, some type of residential, or maybe they do support transitioning to more commercial type uses. Until we have that plan, it's hard for us to make that determination. That's why we rely, even though it is outdated, we still rely on that plan from 2007.
How far out are we on that plan?
I'll let Dan.
We probably will have a draft of a new plan for that area in spring of next year. I mean, we're probably 6 months out or more. But we're going to have a lot of public engagement over the next 6 months, and we'll have lots of time to talk about it. I would also just say, with regard to this subdivision regs and zoning ordinance, it's our goal to try to have drafts of those updates. Don't get me wrong, not final drafts and not approved, but have drafts of those before the end of the year too. So, I mean, we're trying to move pretty fast to address a lot of these kind of needs in both the city and the county.
And to Mr. Reuter's point, I think the zoning regulation update rewrite will go to Mr. Matthews' point about having other options other than industry or manufacturing. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And we do currently have a motion.
I do want to thank Mr. Matthews here. I think you're right. We see this a lot where we're having to put a square peg in a round hole on zoning. And I want to appreciate and say thank you to the opposition for taking note of that and reminding us that that's what we need to do. And you've been paying attention because you mentioned a condition, and I'm very proud of you for thinking of that. So thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? We do have a motion to approve with 2 conditions. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Are there any opposed? One opposed. So motion does carry, and I will make sure everyone understands it will go in front, or it will go to the zoning committee, county commission zoning committee at 9:30 on August 9th in this room.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Item number 5 on the agenda under new business is case number 2023 0101. It's 2510, 2512, 2514 Will Kelly Road. It's a special permit for a residential planned unit development amendment. It has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition? Okay.
Second.
Have a motion to approve. It has been seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Matthews has recused himself. Okay, item number 6 is case number 2023-0103. It's located at 6143 Ooltewah Georgetown Road. It's to rezone from O1 Office District with conditions to C2 Local Business Commercial District. Has a staff recommendation to deny. Is the applicant present? Okay, is there any opposition? We need to schedule time for, okay. If you'll come on forward, I'll let staff take us through this. Mr. Schultz.
Sure. This is case 2023-103. This is a request to rezone from O1 Office District with conditions to C2 Local Business Commercial District. Proposed use is retail. Size of this property is 1.3 acres in size. Looking at this on the zoning map, you can see it's zoned O1. To the north of this property, across Amos Road, is A1 agricultural. To the south and west of this property, immediately abutting this property, is R3. Further west towards I-75 is A1 agricultural. To the east of the site, across Ooltewah Georgetown Road, is R1 with an R1 PUD, and you have A1. About 400 or 500 feet to the south, you do C2. I see a C2 zone. Then further south towards Ooltewah Georgetown Road, Lee Highway, it's where you see more of the commercial mixed-use type zones. There's been some recent zoning history in this area. In 2015, a portion of this site was rezoned from A1 to O1. And then in 2021, an application rezoned the site from A1 to C2. Staff recommended deny, and the application was withdrawn at Planning Commission meeting. So it was in 2021 for a portion of this site as well. And then in 2021, later on, The remainder of the site was rezoned from A1 to O1 with conditions. Those conditions are on the screen. It was related to landscape buffer, no curb cuts on Amos Road, no dumpster allowed on parcel 13207, which is to the north abutting Amos Road. Had a condition on building heights and no internally illuminated signs allowed. So there has been some zoning history on this particular piece of property. Abutting this property, we've had some zoning history as well. Across the site to the north, across Amos Road in 2022, there was a request to rezone that A1 to C2. Staff recommended to deny. The county commission denied that request. And then 2016 to the south, that's where you see that C2 zone pop up. That was from A1 to C2. Again, that was in 2016, prior to the adoption of the most recent White Oak Mountain Area Plan in 2019. This is currently being used as an office. To the north is single unit residential. To the west is single unit residential and will eventually be developed as multifamily. To the east, across Jonestown Road, is vacant property and single unit. To the south of the site is single unit residential, and further south is medical office and multi-unit or multifamily residential. Here's a view of the site from Georgetown Road. This is a view of the site from Amos Road. Another view of the site from Amos Road. This is looking down Amos Road towards I-75. You can see the residential on the right-hand side, and to the left is the current office that's under construction on this property. This is the intersection of Georgetown Road and Amos Road. The site's just to the in the green patch with a mailbox. This is north of the site, which is a single-family dwelling. This is south of the site, which is a single-family dwelling and apartments. East of the site, which is R1 with a PUD. Again, this is in the White Oak Mountain Area Plan, which was adopted in 2019. The plan recommendation or place type is mixed residential, which primarily includes single-family attached and accessory dwelling units. So the plan recommends mixed residential. The plan also encourages more of the mixed-use commercial to be located at the intersection of Georgetown Road and Lee Highway, and not to strip it out along Georgetown Road. And this is just a close-up view of that place type recommendation, which again is mixed residential. The request for commercial uses and a commercial zone at this location is not compatible with the Area 12 plan. It's not compatible with adjacent land uses. Approving C2 district and the uses permitted we introduce a new development form along Amos Road, which right now is primarily single family. C2 approval at this location would also set the precedent for future requests. The adopted land use plan states that commercial and service-based uses are not recommended further away from the commercial node at Lee Highway and Georgetown Road. So staff recommends to deny this request based on not in compliance with land use plan recommendation and the adjacent land uses at this location.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Howland.
Mr. Schultz, I didn't realize that you don't have to do a traffic study yet. How would you feel? It's already a traffic quagmire on that road, especially early morning, late afternoon. People are backed up for a mile. How would this affect it? I'm not sure. Would, just in your professional opinion, would it, the traffic's already?
I'm not a traffic engineer. If I had to guess, I would say.
I'm not sure.
I'll let Todd
Maybe I
talk
should
can speak to that.
What type commercial business he plans to put in there and the traffic.
So C2, what we had asked for.
Hey, sir, if you could, your name and address.
Kareem Juma, I'm the president of the Juma Development LLC. So C2, we had asked for, I had actually pulled a permit for our new office complex on the property. So more than 50% of this is going to be occupied by our company. We have 3 spots that's about 4,800 square feet total that we are asking for either office or a retail. So we would, we also understand some type of restriction on it, not to have a restaurant with a high volume and stuff like that. So and because of the Amos Road, the division of the Amos Road and going forward, it's a huge, and most of the business that's going to come into this place is going to be probably anywhere from 9 a.m. and past that. They will open. If it's a retail, it's going to be probably 10 a.m. We're the only one that's going to be probably, I would say, 9 a.m. Our construction company office design center. So that's one of the reasons. So right before us, there's another, which is a C2, and it does not really bring in any additional traffic to that location. So that's one of the reasons we are trying to go from, instead of just being an office, we have been approached by, the retail, which it's literally a fat flower shop. So you don't have much of a traffic, but so we can have either retail or an office, either one. That's what we're asking for, instead of any kind of high volume C2.
And I know you answered a question, but if you do have some time that you can present your product, I mean, that gave a presentation. I'm just saying, without seeing any other questions, if you have you've got a certain amount of time. If you
So
want
the access, there's not going to be, and going forward, moving past that Amos Road, staff has already said that they're trying to limit to what type of commercial is there going to be any approved or not in the future. But stopping right there at that Amos Road, we only have, we purchased the property next to us so we can be all combined together. So that is, to me, C2 gives us a good, with the limitation, what we can bring in and stop right there for us. And we don't have any entrance from the Amos Road. We only have one entrance from the Ottawa Georgetown Road. So to me, I feel like there's not going to be any conflict of moving forward or the future.
Okay, thank you. And just to be clear, because I think you said it, you got it rezoned 01, but now you're considering putting some retail along with office, which kicks you into needing a C2.
Correct. We did the rezone back 5 years ago to
Okay.
01.
Thank you. Any questions for that? Did I see any I think I asked, I didn't see any. I just want to make sure you have an opportunity. Is there any opposition that would like to speak on this case? Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments from the commission? Or hearing information from staff and the applicant, a motion? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian, how many, when we go compared to the land use plan, this is a pretty recent plan. How many strikes against it does it have? I know I see one obvious staring me in the face
In this location,
in this location.
just going from memory, 2 maybe.
So we're at the 2 level against what the area plan.
I mean, area plan is one of the things we look at. We also look what's changed in the area since the plan has been adopted. And this is a fairly new plan.
It's relatively new.
It's relatively new.
Yeah.
Outside of yours, it's been
Outside of
adopted.
you, right.
Again, that's why we supported a denial of just, continue to strip commercial development along this corridor. And where's that stopping point? And the
Right.
plan doesn't support that. It supports mixed residential. So that's why staff, leaned heavily towards a
No,
denial.
I understand. I understand. Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Dr. Tyler.
I would like to see it stay 01. I mean, I just feel like that's be in line with what we've already had, and that's just my personal preference. It's not exactly my area. It used to be mine. We redistrict, but I would like to see it stay 01, but that's my choice.
Mr. Mayor.
No.
I heard a recommendation, but no motion. Is there a motion? Or I'll entertain.
Support staff's recommendation.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion to deny has been seconded. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. And again, this one will go County Commission Zoning Committee meeting on August 9th. Next case, item number 7, case 2023-0107. It's located at 11303 Appleton Pike. It's to rezone from R2A Rural Residential District to C2 Local Business Commercial District. It's a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition to this case that would like to speak? Okay. Is the applicant present? Okay, great. Mr. Schultz, and both you'll have an opportunity. Mr. Schultz, you could take us through it.
Sure. This is case 2023-107. This is a request to rezone from R2A Rural Residential District to C2 Local Business Commercial District. Proposed use is commercial and office uses. Acres is about 1.1 acres in size. You can see there's a mixture of zones at this location. From R2A to the north, R5 to the south, R2A and A1 to the east, and to the west of this intersection is R2A. And if you go further west, East Brainerd, you see some C2 and C3 zones this location. So there's a mixture of zones this location. There's been no zoning history on this particular piece of property. However, in 2014, there was a mandatory referral to close and abandon a portion of the right-of-way of Bates Road, which you can see the red leader line to that location. And then to the southwest of this site, this is rezoned to C2 on East Brainerd Road. This is a vacant piece of property. To the north across Bates Road is single unit residential. To the southeast along Appleton Pike is single unit residential, and then vacant property to the south across Appleton Pike, and then single unit residential to the east of the site or west of the site along East Brainerd Road. Here's a view of the site from Bates Road and Appleton Pike. This is a view of the site from Appleton Pike. This is a view of the site from Bates Road. View of the site on the right hand side. This is Bates Road. This is north of the site. This is a view south of the site. Northeast of the site, single family dwelling. This is west of the site. This property is in the White Oak Mountain Area Plan, again, which was adopted fairly recently in 2019. The place type recommendation is crossroads place type, which permits small scale businesses that serve the daily needs of the surrounding rural population and people traveling through. Primary uses of this place type include restaurants, small convenience stores, personal services, offices, small markets, auto service and repair, and all auto-oriented commercial. So that's the primary uses in this place type. Secondary uses does allow commercial structures in that 5,000 to 10,000 square foot range. So again, the primary uses are a mixture of commercial uses at this location. Here's a closer view of that land use plan recommendation. You can get and see it's crossroads place type. The request is supported by the adopted plan. This does introduce a commercial zoning at the intersection of Appleton Pike and East Brainerd. The nearest existing commercial zone is through the railroad underpass on East Brainerd Road and doesn't have frontage on Appleton Pike. This will introduce a new land use and development form in this immediate vicinity. However, the plan supports that. Staff does recommend conditions that supports the land use change envisioned by the adopted land use plan and limiting those uses to those identified as suitable for a crossroads place type. So staff recommended to approve with conditions: billboards, tanks for commercial and retail distribution of flammable liquids and gases, auto wrecker services, and storage garages are prohibited. So staff recommends to approve with a condition limiting out those more noxious or nuisance related commercial uses at this location based on the land use plan recommendation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff? Okay, if the applicant would like to come up. And if you'll give your name and address, you've got 9 minutes. And then I believe there was some opposition that would like to speak next. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Christopher Beeson, 5210 Beeson Brook Trail, Appleton. Thank you for hearing our request. The conversation since we received the staff recommendation with staff regarding tanks, retail distribution of flammable liquids and gases, what we are asking for is an exception to small tanks. I believe after a conversation with Mr. Price last night, the exception is maximum of 20-pound propane tanks. So we're asking for you to reconsider that. That's simply what you would get at any other C-store where you get your gas grill tank and you exchange them out. It's not a complicated thing, but I understand the other recommendations. And we're not opposed to that. We held 2 community meetings about this change. And I would say that we had about 75 to 80% of support from our Appleton community. I would say 5 to 10% were kind of whatever. And then a few folks had some opposition at various levels and were willing to have conversations and discussions about it. The fact is we're all not going to get 100% of what we want, but we feel like this is a long needed addition to our Appleton community. Simply a small gas station, C-store, and some adjacent retail space. We're hoping to have a coffee, donut shop, ice cream shop there for our community. Potentially, you could put in a small doctor's office, or we're talking with one of our local spas about putting a satellite office out there, and potentially even a small restaurant that meets wastewater codes. Wastewater obviously is going to affect what can go in there and how much use. I don't know if there's any other questions, but I'm glad to answer them.
Okay, any questions for the applicant?
Motion to
Commissioner.
approve with conditions. It's appropriate now.
Okay,
I don't know, we got opposition.
yeah, I was going to let
Sorry.
opposition. Any other questions for the applicant? I believe there was someone in opposition. If you'd come up, sir, and I know Commissioner Helton is here. We'll make sure he has an opportunity to speak also. Name and address, and you've got 9 minutes.
Mike Price, 3608 Woodcrest Lane, Appleton, Tennessee. First of all, let me state I am not in opposition to what Mr. Beeson is proposing to do. So let that be first and foremost on the record. We did have a community meeting, I would say, that was more informative last night than the first. And out of that meeting, I presented to Mr. Beeson the C2 zone, and staff did knock out a couple of items that would be, I think, objectionable to the neighbors, but there are others that are still left in the list that I would think are not appropriate. For instance, you can get by a special permit a multi-high-rise office motel hotel. You're also allowed to do hotels. You're also allowed to do apartments. You can get special permits as it relates to adult-oriented establishments, funeral homes, and crematories. We didn't think that would be an appropriate use at that location. Commercial radio, television, telephone, microwave, and other communication towers. We didn't think that would be appropriate. Single-wide manufacturing homes. We didn't think that would be appropriate. Short-term vacation rentals, car wash, auto wash. We didn't see that as appropriate. Tourist courts, motels, hotels, fire halls, substations, water towers, radio and television broadcasting stations and studios, storage garages, railroad stations, railroad lines, except as prohibited in Section D, hospitals and clinics. We didn't see that as an appropriate use. Also, community swimming pools and recreational areas operated by membership organizations, double-wide manufacturing homes. I've got all this, which I'm happy to give for the record out of that. There were two other items that Mr. Beeson agreed to last night in the public meeting. So because of the location, this is all residential around us. The landscaping ordinance only requires an 8-foot street yard on the public streets. However, when you front two streets, one can be taken down to 4 feet. I did not see that as an appropriate use of landscaping material going up against the neighbors, especially those on Bates Drive. So what I asked for, and which Mr. Beeson accepted, is that we would have an 8-foot street yard along both frontage roads in through there, so as to provide some additional landscaping. Also, we asked for lighting to be directed away from residential areas. That occurs oftentimes for developments, especially when, again, we're all residential around us. And last is that he indicated that he's looking at a general store type look. We all think that that is a great use, I believe, that we're there. But he mentioned he was going to put a front porch on the building. And so we asked that that would also be a condition, that a front porch be incorporated into the architectural design. We're not here to tell him what the building looks like, but if that's what he wants to put as a use, then as I have so often seen, is that zoning is only as good as what's put in writing. What you don't put in writing, you don't get. So I believe Mr. Beeson has agreed to those specific items at the end, and then hopefully would agree as it relates to these other items as well. One other item that did come up was off-premise signs. Now, those staff has recommended stated billboards. Off-premise signs could include what? I'm a little fuzzy with regards to what that could or could not be.
That's a billboard, basically. Any sign that's advertising something that's not on that sign. That's a
Okay.
billboard.
Which I didn't think that would be appropriate to put here to be advertising for some other sort of business at that particular location as well. So I've got these. I'll leave these up here, but I've got them all here where they could be added into the record if you as a body decide to pass this. If there's any questions, be happy to answer those.
Thank you. And you, sir, did you also want to speak? Sir, if you could give your name and
Sorry.
address.
Michael Keebler, 5080 Parkerson Road. I live 2 minutes roughly from this intersection. I pass through it every day. My family grew up in Appleton, lives on Bates Road. My father-in-law's name is Bates. And the house that's on this property he was born in. Just interesting background for my perspective. I think Mike provided a great list of things in C2 that also should be exceptions to whatever might get approved here. There perhaps a better zoning classification if it was going to get rezoned, perhaps C5, but I think C2 is entirely too broad. As staff pointed out, this is completely surrounded by residential. It might fit in this new plan, but people come to and live in Appleton to be away from these things. When on the other side of the railroad underpass is Appleton proper, there's plenty of businesses over there. That would be a much more appropriate place for this kind of structure rather than at this intersection. As I mentioned, I go through it every morning. You have to be very careful. It's a 4-way stop. People run that stop sign every day. I see it almost every time I go through the intersection. So with the additional traffic that this will create, this being completely surrounded by R2, very close to this property is more appropriate zoning that already exists. If it was attached to an existing C2 or something over in that Appleton proper area, I think it would be much better location for this. And rather than creating a C2 island in the middle of a residential area, something that's been historically residential forever. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Helton, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Lee Helton, 561 Melwood Lane. We held a community meeting last night, and I think in general, the residents of Appleton, as Mr. Beeson said, were welcoming, of this project. They did have several concerns, and we addressed them. The only items of contention we had really were the propane sales. Everybody seemed to want to be able to come and get a propane tank. Everybody barbecues. And the signage, the off-premise signage. I don't think it's a deal breaker, but I think the owner and the developer would like to be able to advertise and monetize his space if he can. If there can be limitations put on the size and scope of those signs, I think he would be welcome to talk about that. And also the radio station. I don't think he's wanting to do a giant antenna farm. Obviously, it won't work there. But I think he does do podcasts. And I think there are several people in the area who might be interested in leasing the space for current, a radio program they do. I've been to their studio, and it's not large in scope. It's pretty small and would fit nicely in a office complex. And I don't think people are we're objecting to that in general. But I would like to encourage y'all to pass it with Mr. Price's restrictions, save the propane, the signage, and the radio station as a resident of District 7. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can staff clarify that condition of tanks for commercial and retail distribution of flammable liquids and gases? That was not intended to prohibit the propane gas sales. This is more of like the large retail distribution facilities, like a Blossman Gas or the bigger retail farms of gas, liquids, stuff, not the retail sales of propane.
Okay, we may add that as a parentheses,
Except gas.
excluding propane tanks. Mr. Beeson, if you would, you've got about 2 minutes to talk, maybe particularly about some of the other conditions that have been brought up, maybe.
So I don't know how many of you travel through that intersection. I appreciate my neighbors. I live in Appleton. I'm just a little over a mile from there, a mile and a half or whatever. And I appreciate his concern. If you travel through that intersection, it's almost like a bowl. The filling station will be at the bottom of that bowl. There's an abandoned home across the street, and there is a mobile home. Those are the only residences that are within 1,000 feet of any of the affected lighting or traffic. The traffic is what it is because we've got subdivisions going out there like crazy. If you traveled out there, the gas station isn't going to bring traffic. The gas station is going to serve the traffic that's there. I think we all understand that. So, I like him. I've been in this community. I don't know how many years he's been, but 27 years in and out of this community for me. Just speaking with Mr. Price, our concern with an offsite signage is that we have the ability to potentially help some of the nonprofits in the area, specifically the churches. A couple of the churches have asked if we would be willing to incorporate some signage for them in there. And one of the terms of our purchase with Mr. Chapman is that we consider their request. Obviously, it has to, go through you guys if you're not for it, but just in speaking with Mr. Price, I think we both would be happy with something along the lines of a 5 foot or 6 foot high, 4.5 foot high sign that would be incorporated in with our signage. So it wouldn't be, some big, ugly, gaudy billboard type of signage. Lighting wise, we're in the design build phase. And so I'm a little hesitant to say for sure that the exact buffer off of the street. I don't disagree with Mr. Price, but I'm a little hesitant to say until we've got our final design and build plan in place. But I don't think lighting is going to be an issue. The two designers we've been talking to, both, that was one of the first things they brought up was, making sure we have low impact of lighting. And the same thing with the off porch. That's our idea. If we don't do the porch on the front, we'll do it on the side. So I'm not sure why that's on the front is so important, but I don't know for sure how that's going to work. And the reason we don't know how that's going to work is one, we've got to deal with the blue line on the back of the property, and we've got to deal with EPB's very firm and difficult easement on the front of the property. So those are issues that, again, we're dealing with in design and build. So I'm hesitant to make those absolutes, but I'm definitely willing to work with our community. We live there. We want to work with people that we're going to be serving in Appleton. We don't want people hating us because we're there. So I don't know. Did I address the comments or questions or any others that you have?
Well, let me see if there's any questions or comments. Councilman Lev.
Thank you, Mr. Beeson. I was at one of the meetings where you presented this to the public, so I did hear your presentation. I drive through there quite frequently. My mom lives in Cleveland, so I use that as a back way from East Brainerd.
Yes, sir.
So I am familiar with the area. My question is, given that I have Commissioner Helton in the room, Mike Price, who obviously knows this business, and yourself, do you think that there's these other issues can be worked out before you get to the county commission level? Because I think there are some things that need to be kind of solidified conversations. And I had the 3 of you in the room, 4 of you with our neighbor as well. If there's confidence in that, I would love to see some head nods or something working this out, because I think you're on the right track.
Yeah.
Communication is key. You've held a couple meetings. I think that's great. I think the aesthetics of this is not something we're going to talk about here at the planning commission level. That's something that you all can work out with your commissioner and the neighbors. And if that's okay, and there's confidence in that, I would definitely make a motion to.
I think Mike is just applying for the job to be my engineer.
Well, probably not, but I'll see if anybody else has any comments before I make a motion.
Oh, I thought that was a motion.
Okay, I will make a motion to approve the conditions pending any other comments.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion to approve with the conditions, I think with some commitments to maybe iron out and have this discussion.
Mr. Chairman, can we clarify which conditions we're talking about?
I believe the ones that you have that staff presented, correct?
Did you not qualify that the
Propane
propane liquid did not apply?
Yes, so you're going with the conditions on the screen with the exception of,
Is that true?
I will.
Yeah.
So I know think that.
Well, no, I mean, the way I understood the comment, and Councilman Ledford can correct me, is that he was making a motion to approve the conditions from staff
Gotcha.
with, I think, the acknowledgement from the applicant, the opposition, and those involved to maybe clarify a few of these additional prior to county commission. That's what I heard on the motion. I don't know if that's
Correct, sir.
okay. So I have a motion. Go ahead and make that clear. We'll make it publicly about the propane tanks, that does not exclude propane retail sales.
Yes.
But
The conditions on the screen, which I'll be voting on, with the exception of propane.
just the clarification on the tanks
Gotcha.
is that was my understanding.
And the
and
condition Mr. Price brought can work out for hopefully county
Yep.
commission.
I didn't hear the applicant agree to all of them, and so I think that's most appropriate. But anyway, any other discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And that is August 9th, county committee meeting. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Matthews.
Mr. Chairman, if I could be out of order for a moment, I may have to leave early, but I did want to ask the staff to look into some of the regs, particularly, I believe Brian and I have talked about this several times too. It's the 38502, the lots of record. If the chart that has to do with the side yards, if we could get staff to review that chart, had one instance in an older section, the lot was, and according to this, if a lot is 60.1 feet or more, it jumps to a 25-foot setback. If it's 60 feet or less, it's 10 feet. So I'd like for staff to look at that, see if that can be modified, or see if we can do something with that.
And by that, you're talking about the city zoning code.
The city, that's correct.
You know, we are going through the zoning code rewrite. We can possibly look at that as part of that assessment.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. So that's already happening, Brian, as part of the,
I'm not sure we're actually looking at that lot of record
Well, but
section
you-
itself. We can wrap it
you'll
up
make a
into that.
note of that.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
do that all
Thank
at
you.
one time.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Okay, next item is item number 8. It's case number 2023-0109. It's located at 9098 East Brainerd Road. It's to rezone from M2 Wholesale and Light Industry District with conditions to A1 Agricultural District, R2A Rural Residential District, and C2 Local Business District. Has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition? Have a motion to approve. It has been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 9 is case number 2023-0110. It's located at 8209 Bell Mill Road. It's to rezone from A1 Agricultural District to R1 Single Family Residential District. Has a staff recommendation to deny. Is the applicant present? Okay. Is there opposition present that would like to speak? Okay. Mr. Schultz, if
Mr.
you
Chairman, we did receive a lot of emails in opposition to this. It should be in your spreadsheet that's in front of you.
Mr. Schultz.
This is case 2023-110. This request is rezoned from A1 Agriculture District to R1 Single Family Residential for proposed use of single unit residential subdivision. Total acres of this property is 102. Based on our site plan policy, when you're rezoning from A1 to R1 or any rezoning to R1, those site plans are required unless you're doing a PUD. This is not a PUD. It's strictly A1 to R1, so site plan was not submitted. Therefore, staff doesn't have a ability to show the number of units listed or the density for this proposed development. Looking at the zoning map, there is no R1 near this particular piece of property except to the south, the setting right here. Everything abutting to the north, south, east, and west is A1. There's a little R5 off of Bell Mill Road. You may remember 2 months ago, just right to the south of Bell Mill, we had 2 special permits for wedding venues. We did put conditions on those, worried about the capacity, the number of cars that be using Bell Mill. We stated the condition that no more than 300 cars or wedding guests anytime on any one parcel. So there's 2 parcels there, could have a total of 300 cars on Bell Mill. Looking at a zoomed out picture, most of the R1 zoning you see in this area is across Snow Hill Road, and that happened in 2022. You can see on Snow Hill Road, 8610 Profit Lane. This property was rezoned from A1 to R1. But this general vicinity along Bell Mill and to the north, southeast, to west is pretty much all A1. Again, as mentioned, just to the south, we had 2 special permits for wedding venues approved about 2 months ago. To the north is agriculture uses. Further north is single unit residential. To the east across Snow Hill Road is single unit residential. It's under construction, multi-phases. To the south, again, are those 2 event venues, wedding venues. Further south is agriculture uses. To the west is single unit residential. This piece of property does have some flood hazard and floodway shown on the property. Again, it's 100-something acres, but probably roughly 3/4 of it, a little less than 3, more than a half is probably the floodway, some type of flood hazard zone. Here's a view of the site from Bell Mill. Another view of the site, you can see there's a huge transmission line that runs across the property as well. Another view of Bell Mill Road. This is south of the site. East of the site, which is single family dwellings. This property is located in the Whipple Creek area plan. Again, that plan was adopted in 2007. The plan or place type, the plan recommendation, not place type, is low intensity residential. The plan goes a single unit detached housing with a density of 3 dwelling units an acre or less. Close up view of Bell Mill, and the plan recommendation again is low intensity residential with single family dwellings being the proposed use with 3 dwelling units or less. Since we didn't have a site plan, I couldn't show you the site plan, but this proposed R1 district is not compatible with the Whipple Creek area plan surrounding land uses and development form. The R1 district would introduce a much higher density development with smaller lots. The development standards in the R1 would introduce small urban lot development pattern with a maximum density of 7.26 dwelling units per acre. Again, that's higher than the plan recommendation of 3. The existing development form of this location, the west of Snow Hill Road, is typically larger agricultural lot development pattern with very low intensity dwelling unit per lot counts of 1.3 along Red Cedar Court and 0.25 dwelling units along Beaver Trail. Since there was no site plan submitted with the application, staff did a potential lot yield based on overall gross acreage. This will be lower based on land dedicated for infrastructure, flood hazards, and the TVA transmission line that comes through there. As presently zoned, which is A1, the site could be developed with single-family detached dwellings with a maximum density of 2 dwelling units per acre, resulting in a gross lot yield of 204 single-family lots. The R1, if rezoned, would permit a gross lot yield of 741. Again, those numbers may be less depending on land set aside for infrastructure improvements. That was just giving you an idea of the difference in lot yields. The current A1 agriculture district more closely aligns with the plan recommendation of 3 dwelling units per acre than the requested R1 residential district. The area is currently undergoing an area planning process, which will provide guidance on appropriate development form and density in the future of these locations. If there is a desire for flexibility in lot frontages, lot size, and setbacks, a special exception permit for a PUD in the A1 district would be a more appropriate tool to provide that flexibility in development standards. Staff recommends deny based on those comments.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Questions for staff?
Just a comment. Are you aware that Bell Mill does not go all the way through to Snow Hill Road from Hunter?
We are. It does not connect. That's correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure you're aware of that. And also, I believe some people have we'll talk about that.
Any other questions? And I believe there were some, if y'all want to line up, I know there's a number of y'all that want to speak in opposition. The applicant will have 7 minutes, and then we'll allow some opposition to speak.
Our clock's not working, so I'll keep time on the phone.
Sure.
Let you know.
Go ahead, Mr. Price.
Thank you. Mike Price, MAP Engineers. So the request is to go from A1 to R1, and staff in their recommendation, as it relates to recommending to deny, based upon a density of 7.4 units per acre and some 700 and something homes potentially, That's the correct recommendation. However, that's not what our plan would be. We would see putting a restriction on this of being no more than 2.9 units per acre, which therefore falls into compliance with the Wolf-Tiever plan. So we would limit our density to no more than 292 units. So that would be the number that we would be looking at. I think given the staff recommendation that I've read through here, as it references many times the 3.0 units per acre, also going through and looking at the Wolf-Tiever plan and looking at what it shows for this site also calls for 3 units per acre. So we propose to limit ourselves to a density of 2.9 units per acre. My guess is that the staff would have changed their recommendation or will change their recommendation as it relates to what we were asking. So we did also have looked at a traffic in the area. We've looked at specifically at the intersection of Bell Mill Road and Hunter Road. Our ideal situation would be to look at improving that intersection. We're willing to do that. However, there is one property owner that actually owns both sides of Bell Mill Road, and we have reached out, but at this point unsuccessfully, to discuss if there is a way to acquire some right of way so we could create more of a 90-degree intersection. So assuming that that is unsuccessful, at the end of the day, we had our traffic engineer look at it, and there will be a public meeting, I might add, that's going to occur Thursday night. I'm sure Dr. Highlander, you can mention that as at the appropriate time that you've been able to set up for us. And so we looked at that, and what basically comes out of this is that the intersection, if we don't do any improvements to it, will continue to function in an acceptable manner. Now, it's not ideal, and it's not what we want to see occur in the area, but it can function with the additional traffic in the event that we're unsuccessful in acquiring additional right of way and doing the improvements that we'd like to do that we think would benefit not only the residents that would live here in this subdivision, but also those that currently live in the neighbors around us. So with that, I'll yield and then come back after opposition has had their opportunity.
Thank you. Any questions for applicant? Okay, sir, if you want to come forward, and if y'all just want to cycle through, we'll try to watch time, but your name and address, and go ahead, sir.
David Mayfield, Mountain Pass Development Subdivision. I submitted a PowerPoint. Do you have that?
I do have a PowerPoint. You only got 9 minutes.
I'll go quick.
Okay, let me try to. Just let me know when to move.
Next page. Hamilton County is completely unprepared for the development of the residential A1 or R1 on Bell Mill Road. We'll show you why. Next page. What is Hamilton County's plan of service? Road improvements, school bus, fire protection, sewer capacity, infrastructure, and schools. Next page. The requirements in Hamilton County for a new street is 30 feet of pavement for a collector, 26 for a local service, 22 feet for a private access road. Next page. At its widest point, Bell Mill Road is 20 feet wide with no right of way, no curbs, no gutters. Next page. And we have some pictures to go through here of Bell Mill Road. Next page. Next. Next. Hey. Bell Mill Road and Hunter Road. From Hunter Road approaching from I-75, Bell Mill Road makes a 125-degree right turn off of Hunter Road onto 20 feet of pavement. Next slide. Here is an example of the 125-degree for a service vehicle. Next page. Here's a school bus trying to attempt to make a 125-degree in the turn. Now, this is a video. Can you click and play?
No, let me. I don't see a video on it.
Okay. Hamilton County encroachment at the end of Bell Mill Road. Hamilton County is encroached on private property and has paved over beyond the radius of the turn. And if the property owner recovers that section of the encroachment, we're going to lose 10 feet of our radius of turn. As you can see there in my triangle, I'm representing the encroachment area. We got a natural spring on the side of Bell Mill Road that flows 365 days a year. If we come in and do road improvements, we're going to get into the natural spring. And we do have cattails that are growing down there, which is almost a wetland in the area. Next slide. Next slide. So here's an example of Mr. Skidmore's development in Hickson. So he's packed them in. Next slide. If this happens to us on Bell Mill Road, the 250 houses is going to give anywhere up to 500 cars that are going to be coming down Bell Mill Road to these places that I have brought to your attention. Now, we say we can make improvements, but it's extremely dangerous and extremely tight at Bell Mill and Hunter Road. Next slide. So we don't oppose growth or development, but what we do oppose is growth without planning. So I'm asking you, please don't put us in this situation. We need you to vote no until we resolve some issues. Next slide. So we really need the county engineer. We need the highway department, the traffic department, the water quality control, WWTA to come in and see if we have any capacity or overflow problems on the sewer that we have there existing now. The Board of Education, Tri-County Fire Department, which fire truck cannot get into that road, and the site plan. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
About 5 minutes left.
And just to
Thank
give you a visual of
Thank you.
what the intersection looks like.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Kim Helton, 8618 Snow Hill Road. I just want to also point out the floodplain. There have been many developments in our area that they have filled in the floodplain, built homes, and or put stormwater ponds in the floodplain. And so we would also like to know what that impact that will have on upstream and downstream properties from there. There's the East Tennessee Natural Gas Company right upstream from there. The spring for our water is right upstream from there. So if you fill in the floodplain and you send more water down that way, will it flood those two very important, pieces of property? And yes, the Wolf Fever Plan was passed by the legislation. The Tennessee Code that says any land use decisions should be consistent with the plan. Anything by the legislative body, planning commission, or board of zoning appeals must be consistent with the plan. The Wolf Fever Plan says for another study, it's like a special study, a focus area right below this. So it says the upper Wolf Fever Creek flows through a large portion of this node. Special care should be taken not to disturb the natural stream break, floodplain, and course of the waterway. So we also think some sort of stipulation should be placed on this where there's no disturbing the floodplain for homes or stormwater ponds.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Greg Lewis, 5555 Hunter Road. I live about a mile down the road from where this is proposed. I agree with the recommendations from staff and what the others have said this afternoon. In particular, we haven't had a community meeting yet. I understand from last night we're going to have one, but we hadn't had one yet, so we don't have any idea what the plan is for this property. I'm also concerned about the traffic as well. Bell Mill is basically a dead end road at this point. And so when you stick hundreds of homes down at the end of it, I live on Hunter Road. There's times I sit at the end of my driveway and count 40 or 50 cars drive by before I can pull out onto Hunter Road. So when you put a subdivision of any size down on Bell Mill, you're going to back up traffic all the way down Bell Mill Road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Rhonda Sandberg. I live at 5913 Mountain Pass Drive in Ottawa. And I am a recent refugee from California, having moved here about a year and a half ago to avoid this very kind of situation. So I believe the decision to Californianize this peaceful neighborhood by jamming too many houses into one area lacks integrity and consideration of those who were here before all of you. Therefore, I will let God's word speak to this issue better than I can. In Proverbs 29, verse 8, it says, "Disrespectful men bring a city into a snare, but wise men turn away anger." Jeremiah 29, verse 7 says, "Seek the peace of the city and pray to the Lord for it, for in the peace thereof shall you have peace." And finally, Proverbs 11, verses 3 and 5, "The integrity of the upright shall guide them. The righteousness of the perfect shall direct his way. When it goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices. By the blessing of the upright, the city is exalted." I implore you to choose integrity and stop this project now. And I pray it in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. We're right at 9 minutes, but I'm going to give some additional time, please. Yes, ma'am.
So my name is Amanda Harden. This is my son, Jackson Harden. We live at 5806 Mountain Pass Drive in Ottawa, Tennessee. And we're in support with everything that's been said with the opposition. The main thing I would like to highlight is that with the turn, it is not safe. And with that, even with, they did a great job illustrating with the larger vehicles, but even smaller large vehicles. I have to drive a larger vehicle to accommodate my son's wheelchair, and I cannot make a right-hand turn if there's somebody exiting on Belmore Road. And so I've almost been rear-ended multiple times because most people don't expect you to come to a complete stop to make a right-hand turn. And so adding that additional congestion of all these additional cars is just going to cause additional traffic. The other thing that I think is important to mention that hasn't been is the impact it's going to have on the schools. We have Wallace Smith Elementary and Hunter Middle School, where my son attends, and it's already overcrowded. To add that many more houses and have many more children that would eventually come would be a greater impact on the students that are already there, who are already dealing with overcrowding with being smaller, older schools. And so I think that is another reason why this needs to be opposed.
Thank you. Yes,
Alex Nelson, Mr. Highlighter, I was hoping to get on the record when the meeting on Thursday will be that you mentioned, as well as Mr. Price mentioned.
Yes, sir. Please.
The meeting, the community meeting, and Mr. Price has graciously agreed to be there as well, will be at 6:30 at Wallace Smith Elementary School this Thursday. I'm not great on social media, but I've been trying to get it posted.
I'm not here. That's all right. Thank you. Okay. And the only other point I wanted to make, I noticed the other day driving on I-75, well, it's been about a week ago. There was a public notice that was put out by the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation regarding a proposed impact to wetlands and a rerouting of the stream for some construction that's going to occur and that would ultimately impact the Wolf Teaver Creek. So I made a copy of this for you all. I reached out to them. You mentioned about the flood issues regarding the Bell Mill development, and I just that's something to keep in consideration. I don't know what the 436 foot stream adjustment is going to do, but thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I guess it's my turn.
Yes, sir.
All right.
And you, if you could, your name and address, just so we
sure.
got it right. Yes, sir.
Ronnie Barnes, 5536 Hunter Road, Noodlewa. I lived on Bell Mill, so I guess I would know more about anybody else. Lived on Hunter Road, on Bell Mill Road for 29 years. And I know that area. And I can tell you one thing about it. That land across the street, I rented for 5 years and rented for cows. That's the only thing it's really good for is cows. And I'll tell you why, because it had sinkholes as big as this desk, if not bigger. We had calves that fell into those sinkholes and had to be pulled out of those sinkholes. We had to put big giant rocks in there to keep it from caving in. And I'm afraid for homes to be built and stuff like that. At the end of the road, you're talking about a flood zone, you have heavy rains, and that water is that high at the end of that road. It's no good for anything except running cows. That's all I say about that. Now, it does have a high side. I will say that. Let me be fair. A high side and back side you might be able to build on. But the thing is about this road is it's a little old county road. And all they did was to pave it. That's all they did with it, okay? It doesn't have any kind of sides on each side to put anything on there. Next thing I say about this is that everyone has said it, and I'll say it again. If you try to get out of Bell Mill Road on the Hunter Road, and you put another 300 or 400 or 500 cars on that road, you will never get out of there. It's not fair to the people that spent their money, and I don't own a home up there, so I can say it. The people who took their savings, built homes up there in Mountain Pass, and now they can't even get out of there to go to work. They can't get out of there to take their kids to school. That's not fair. It's not fair, like that lady said, to overload that school like it's going to be done. And that's what's going to happen there. And worse still is you got people on Hunter Road out there. I live now on Hunter Road. I got my family who lives out there, and they pull out there, and I'll be awake all night long worried about the fact that there's going to be a major accident. You can't even get a fire engine out there you had to put out a fire. You can't get let me tell you something. You ask any sheriff in this county, because I've got anything on my grandson. Sorry, when you're 85, things just come slow sometimes. Okay, all right. Anyway, a grandson who's a deputy sheriff, he said this is the most dangerous road in the county. One of, if not the most dangerous road in the county. Ride out there for yourselves. Do yourself a favor. Go out there and look. It curves like this and this and this, all blind curves. And you put that many more cars on there, there'll be accidents after accidents after accidents. And God forbid there'll be life after life after life that's lost. No, sir. No, ma'am. There's nowhere in this world that we should put more houses out there like that. At the very end, right now, they've already got apartments going to go up. That's going to crowd Ooltewah City that we love out there like you cannot believe. And now we're going to add more? No, ma'am, no, sir, that's not right. See, like I just told you a while ago, I'm 85 years old. It used to be a country worrying about the people, what the people thought and what the people needed. And the days become more and more about the dollar. How many dollars could be made? And that's sad, very sad. I beg you to think about the people. Think about the people in Ooltewah. You may not live there, but think about the people and the children that go to school there. Think about the people that drive on that road. Think about the danger it is to these people. Don't add more road. No, don't add any more cars on that road. They can build somewhere else.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. I really do. Thank you very, very, very much.
Commissioner Eversole. And we'll give the applicant some time, additional time. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Jeff Eversole, 10210 Highway 58. Last fall, I was elected to represent District 10 in Hamilton County Commission. And one of the number one aspects in representing Ooltewah, Collegedale, part of Appleton, all the way to Georgetown, was growth, infrastructure. Can't get from point A to point B. And I think people fully understand we still got to grow. We still got to have homes. But we got to do things the right way. So I'm here asking you guys, let's do our part. Let's do the right thing. Where we have overgrown, let's follow the advice from the staff to where we deny this piece today till we get our rezoning plans in place, till we get our new area growth plans in place so we get some other things caught up so that we don't put ourselves in a position that 5-10 years from now that we're not proud to live in the east side of Hamilton County anymore. Because we're at that point right now. We're getting to that point in some areas. So I would just caution us. We need to be careful. Please deny this piece. I'm not saying that we don't need more homes and more growth, but we need to be real strategic about it. We've got to make sure that we have the right infrastructure, either coming in place or in discussion, so that we can have more growth in the future in other areas. We've got to look at these areas that we've oversaturated in, and we need to either hit the pause button or maybe do something a little different than what we've currently been doing. So I would ask you to please, let's deny this case here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Price.
Thank you. So first off, let me state that, and this is not intended as a threat. This is just spelling out where things stand as it creates today. So let's just say, for sake of discussion, that the case is denied. Everybody has said you can still, according to staff, 200 homes could be built on this property. I don't think 200 homes versus what we're proposing at 294 is going to create any different of a scenario as it relates to the traffic at that intersection. I would further point out, if you look at Mountain Pass subdivision, there's 100 acres still to develop. Just for sake of discussion, if they develop at 2 homes per acre, there's 400 homes. You're still back into the same situation. And they have that ability to do that by right. Now, that being said, I do think that there needs to be discussion and dialogue to occur. And so with that, I think it would probably be incumbent upon me to ask for a deferral for 30 days and then let this be brought back up. So that's 2, I guess, that Chairman Collier will have coming back up next month. But to have that discussion on Thursday as it relates to the residents out that way and talk about this. But again, there is growth problems. There are infrastructure issues that are out that way. But at the end of the day, growth is still coming. There's 8 homes or 8 residents that move into this city, this county every day. And let me just state that it was 61 years ago that my parents brought me back from California. I was 6 weeks old. So I was one of the original ones moving from California to Tennessee. So as it relates to people wanting to live here, they do. And we've got to address it. And that means that the county needs to take a proactive stance in trying to address some of these issues on Hunter Road or other roads. So be it. I'm all for it. But I think that there's limited means that the county has. And until something changes, this problem is going to continue to rear its head time and time again. But growth is going to continue to come. So with that, I've just asked for a 30-day deferral. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Second. Okay. I have a motion to defer for 30 days, and I believe there's a community meeting on Thursday, but any discussion on that motion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? I want it. Abstain. Okay. Motion carries. It'll defer. It'll be back in front of this body in 30 days. What date did you say you think that is, Mr. Schultz?
That'll be August 13th.
August 13th, 1:30. Okay. Item number. Thank y'all. Thanks for your patience too.
That's 1 o'clock. Could you ask?
Oh, I'm sorry.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
August 13th, 1 o'clock.
Yes. Don't miss the meeting. 1 o'clock in August. Item number 10 on the agenda is case number 2023-0108, Double Play Drive, special permit for residential planned unit development. Amendment has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition? Make sure I can see everybody.
Mr. Chairman, we did receive 1 email in opposition.
Case number 2023-108 on Double Play Drive. Any opposition in the crowd? Okay, has a staff recommend?
Second.
Okay, motion to approve has been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Item number 11, SD 2023-0022. Is that right? Is it a final plat?
This is in connection to the case you just approved. We moved it to be together.
So it's a plat.
Yes.
So we just approved the PUD. This is the plat. Okay, I have a motion to approve. It has been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Great. Now on to mandatory referrals. Item 12 is mandatory referral 2023-105. It's located at 4536 Highway 58 for the city of Chattanooga. It's a mandatory referral for public property acquisition. Any comments from the staff? Or any opposition from the public?
Second.
Okay, has been, motion to approve has been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Amendments and resolutions. A resolution to amend the Town of Lookout Mountain zoning regulations to add a new chapter relative to sign regulations. I guess, Mr. Schultz.
Yes, we received an email from Brooke Pippinger, I guess, 3 or 4 weeks ago, wanting us to process an amendment to the Lookout Mountain zoning regulations. Their Board of Commissioners approved this amendment, and because it's in the zoning code, we have to make a recommendation.
So it comes from their council or
from their board. And I don't know if somebody's here. I think.
Okay.
She's here. If you have any questions.
Any questions or a motion?
Second.
A motion to approve has been seconded. Any discussion? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. A resolution to amend the City of Chattanooga zoning regulations to amend Chapter 38 zoning, Article 2 definitions, Article 4 general regulations, and Article 3 Division 27 uses requiring short-term vacation rental certificates. Mr. Schultz.
Sure. This is cleaning up some language from about a couple months ago on short-term vacation rental for non-owner occupied in the City of Chattanooga. You have to be in commercially zoned property, and it's considered like a commercial use. A lot of times we get requests for UGC with conditions of residential uses only. After meeting with LDO and discussions back and forth, we determined that STVRs are not residential uses. So in that condition of residential uses only is applied to property, they have to come back and lift that condition. And by doing that, that also triggers an 18th month waiting period. So we're clarifying that stipulation that STVRs are not residential uses. And then we're cleaning up some other language. There's some leftover language, like in the definition section of the Chapter 38, just referencing Division 27, which is the STVR code. And then we had some leftover hangover stuff about Section 3836, where STVRs are allowed in any zoning district. So we had to clean up that. So 2 of those are clarification, and one's clarifying that for condition purposes, STVRs are not residential uses.
Second.
Okay. Have a motion to approve. It has been seconded. Any discussion?
Briefly, I'd like to say I appreciate what they're doing, but I'm going to compliment. I started calling Vice Mayor, but Chris Anderson, I'm not sure, senior advisor, and for the work that you've done with those short-term vacation rentals. And I would like to see the county emulate what you have done. Thank you.
Thank you. So I believe we're in discussion. Motion to approve seconded. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, staff updates. Are there any comments on non-agenda items from the gallery public? Seeing. Go ahead, Mr. Payne.
Come on, Bell Mill.
Of course, we're not talking about agenda items. You're in reference to.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm just asking a question because I want to understand what the thought.
Understood.
So in this, when you're doing your deliberations and we said, we denied, we based it on the worst case scenario, saying 7 per acre. But all through many times I've sat here and said, well, we'll approve it, but we're going to cap it at 3, or we're going to cap it at 5, or we're going to say no radio towers and no propane or whatever it is. I'm just curious to what, in your deliberations, how do you just come up with, hey, we deny it because it could be 500 versus, hey, we're going to approve it, but we're going to limit it to 300.
I'll let Dan respond to that. I do believe, well, I will say 2, we didn't have a site plan, number 1. And right. And secondly, we're in the process, I think would add some complexity to this. We're in the process of updating our land use plan to provide guidance. That's a real reason too.
Well, I will say it. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I recommend every applicant bring a site plan. I will never accept that no site plan or a hand-drawn one on my kitchen table is good. I think it gives more information to this council, to the planning commission. It gives it more information to our elected officials. Folks worry that it's going to get conditioned or something else, but that to me is a separate issue. So I think always bring a site plan. I think it would always help. Having said that, I think it's just you heard a lot of the issues today about the gentleman that had his own PowerPoint. There's a couple of things on there that are fairly reasonable things, and I think that's what our county commission is looking for, is that we've had some analysis, some discussion of growth, and where we think we just need to update plans and be able to give everybody more confidence that we know how to manage the growth that's coming. Good points, though. Thank you for your time always.
Any other public comments or planning commission comments on non-agenda items?
I will say on Bell Mill,
yes, sir.
There've been at least 10 major trucks that have stuck in that ditch, and it blocks traffic for hours. You can't just take a little. I mean, it's a 45-degree angle off a narrow road, and as is, if he could get a 90-degree, that would be a lot different than what he has right now.
Well, I'm going to try to add context, but then I'm not going to. I probably shouldn't add context. But no, that's right. Well, I mean, the gentleman was correct. There's been some modifications to that intersection. And if you remember in his PowerPoint, he said that the county's encroached on private property, trying to straighten out that. So what we have to discuss as a county relative to these types of issues are impacts to private property and what amount of process we need to go through and what amount of funding, because that intersection could be a 90-degree. And I believe that developer would make it a 90-degree, but he doesn't have ability to purchase property from private property owners. And the government only has that process through a certain legal process. And so those are all great discussions. You hear a lot about, well, why don't you expand your right of way? Why don't you expand the road? For a couple of reasons. It takes purchase of private property, which if the property owner is unwilling or the property owner doesn't want to sell because they want to limit development, you get into a situation that also requires funding. But this is all good conversation relative to impacts to infrastructure and what development and more density calls. So that was my comment.
Mr. Vice Chair, we have one more item. In
Yes,
preparation, we're going to ask you all to vote next month on updating the street standards and other elements from the city subdivision regulations. We've been working on this for about 18 months, and I'm really, want to thank a lot of staff and other folks in the public that have been involved in this for the last 18 months. But we need to move on to other things that we need to work on in both the city and the county. So we are really asking y'all to take a vote on this next month. So if you got questions or things that you want to change, please be thinking about those. And I'm going to turn it over to Eric.
Thanks, Dan. And thanks for the opportunity to come and share some updates. It's been probably 6 months since we came before this body. We wanted to just give an update on what has been happening, what changes have been made, and are happy to go through in as much detail as you all want us to about what those changes in the text amendments are. Like Dan said, coming back next month for the vote for that. Like I said, quickly go through some changes, what has happened in the meantime. I'll talk through a little bit of kind of the global issues that we're talking about, and then can get into the contents. Just as an orientation, a reminder of where we are at. A number of years ago, the street standards were removed from the subdivision regulations for the city of Chattanooga. We are proposing to restore, with some modifications, those regulations back. We've done some peer city research to understand what cities across the state are doing, making sure that we are updating the language to reflect more recent city standards that have been updated, including the International Fire Code, which was recently updated by the city, and addressing feedback that we have heard from the development community and planning commissioners throughout this process. As Dan mentioned, we started last summer with some public work sessions where we talked through the proposed language at the time, received comments throughout that time period. In January, we came before you with some proposals. We did not make it through very many of the particulars with that, but used that as an opportunity and heard direct the feedback that we heard from you, that we needed to spend the time working with the development community to really understand what their concerns were and see what areas of compromise we could find within that. We've had 2 working session groups over the last few months. From staff's perspective, it's been very productive. We've made substantive changes throughout all of the proposed changes, and there are still a few sticking points that we can get into. We're here today and proposing to come back in August. Overall, like I said, we received feedback in a number of formats, both letters and emails that we have received throughout that time period, addressing specific concerns, as well as the 2 working group meetings that had good attendance and good participation through those. This is a chart showing that we had 3 different versions. One that we brought to you in January. We made some modifications based on what we heard during that time with the public comments and from all of you. We made some changes and then made changes throughout that working group process to where we are today. Green and red were how we have categorized the language, green being areas where we think there is agreement between ourselves, what the city departments are saying, what the development community is requesting, and red, some areas where there is a little bit of disagreement within that. As you can see, we have moved from an even split between those green and red ones to where there has now 43 where items where we believe we are in agreement and 11 where they're still not. We can get into the specifics, but these are the major themes that that are causing those remaining disagreements. Connectivity, block length and dead end street thresholds, turnaround, various access to turnarounds, the street slopes, sidewalks, and the variance process. A couple of overarching things not related to any specific language in here. What we propose, based on what we have heard from the development community, is a delayed start or a grace period, so that after August and the vote on that, if it was to be adopted at that time, there would be a 6-month period in which developments that are already in progress can continue to move forward. That would mean that in February, submissions that were received in February would be required to meet those new regulations. So the first cases that you would see would be the April Planning Commission after that. We're also proposing after that time period where they are in effect to do both 6 and 12 months and then ongoing evaluations to make sure we're understanding what needs to change. We think we're getting close to what is right, but we know that we need to continue to adjust over time. And as we're seeing developments come in, subdivisions that are needing a large amount of variances or having particular sticking points, we want to be able to address that and make continuous changes. As Dan has repeatedly said, we don't want these documents to be static. We want them to be iterative changes over time. This has been many years since we have touched this, but it does not need to be the last by any means. We're also proposing as a part of this a pre-submittal meeting. This aligns with what the county is doing. We're proposed to do that during the evaluation period for all subdivisions to make sure that we're understanding what is really going on. And we have heard feedback that there may be a need for waivers for certain types of subdivisions, scales, or types to not have pre-submittal meetings. We propose that all subdivisions continue to have pre-submittal meetings so we can really see what those sticking points are, but are open to making those adjustments going forward. This is really focused so that in particular, the Chattanooga Fire Department and the Department of Public Works can come together with planning staff to make sure we're understanding, addressing the comments, and bringing those comments to all of you when they come forward. We have a new variance form that we've proposed. The existing form that has been in use is still saying the same. We're adding some more explicit places for city staff to provide their feedback so that you can see clearly and easily what they have reviewed, what their concerns or approvals may be through that. In general, though, there is no change to the variance process. As it happens today, plats and variance applications are submitted to RPA at the same time.
it goes through the staff review and comes to the planning commission on the same time period as it would today. So that just like today, when there are plats and variances that are considered, they would happen in the same time period. There would just be additional things because there are more regulations that might be under the variance process. We've also heard requests for many places for staff approval of variances. Again, we're open to that. We would request that planning commission, again, keep that under the 6 or 12-month review period. We would like to hear directly from planning commission what those places are where you think it is appropriate for staff to have approval of that. Because the variance process is going to you for approval, we have some recommendations, but ultimately would like to have you recommend to staff where those staff approvals are best suited. Circle back to one of the things that we talked about in January, the city standard drawings. The latest version of those are located online on the city's website. We can share that directly with you if you are interested and need it. One major change that we have made to the proposed subdivision language, we can get into this in a little bit more detail, based on feedback that we heard from all of you, as well as the development community. Feedback that it was not always clear when and how changes to the standard drawings would be made. The city is committing to not only having a public process generally, but coming before the planning commission, and we're adding proposing to add this language to the subdivision, saying that they shall notify planning commission with public notice within 30 days of any changes to the standard drawings going forward. The latter, yes. And if we need to, we maybe need to clarify the language within that so that it's not 30 days after. Yeah, thank you for that. So, yes. Certainly aren't intending to do that. Yeah, we want this to be an open process so that people are understanding and not caught by surprise. Okay. We're working on a few of them. We are not going to get to zero based on that. I think there. One example might be the steepness of streets, where the International Fire Code and the Chattanooga Fire Department currently the adopted version of the IFC that the city has says 10%. That's what the subdivision regulation says. The development community has requested higher than that by right, but the fire department is holding firm to that. So like that is not one
we would like to consider adopting. So there's going to be just changes that the public works, city government are going to just have a different point of view than the private sector, mainly because they're on different sides of the issue, honestly. And there'll be a lot of things you can talk about why they're on different sides of the issues. But I think what we're hoping we could do is adopt it, monitor it every month. We can have it advertised every month if we want to. This planning commission can vote on it every month if they want to. I mean, we want to move past it. And so I don't know any other way other than just try it out, see how it goes, and keep, change. If we need to tweak things, then tweak them.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you mentioned the staff variance approvals, you said that y'all may have recommendations on what those items would be. Are y'all going to be bringing that next month for us?
Yes, we can. So we heard directly from the development community about a number of the specific items in here where they requested staff have approval, and we had identified some additional ones as well. So we have that list that we can share.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Sorry about that.
Are we
yes, sir.
Continuing to hear more, or because I have more questions, but I might want to wait until there's more context.
Go ahead.
We can certainly go through. We're ready to go through line by line if you would like us to do that, or skip ahead to particular sections. So if you have particular questions, happy to talk about those section by section. Or
I mean, this will be probably the only time you're going to have to ask questions in this forum. You obviously can ask questions individually. You can send emails. You can do whatever. So yes, I would ask questions, but I don't want y'all to think we have to go through all of it today. I mean, we've got a month, but I do want to make certain that y'all feel like we are going to adopt this next month. We have other things we have to work on, and we need the planning commission involved in those.
Mr. Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, just a general comment. I think it's encouraging to see the progress made between, finding common ground where possible. It's obvious that there's been some significant progress there made. As a general comment, I agree with what Dan just mentioned, is that we do need to move past this, but I want to say too that doesn't mean we have to adopt what is presented to us. I think at that point in time, this body will need to discuss and figure out a document that we think is appropriate to adopt.
We also have a new public works director in the city of Chattanooga, and some of these variants and other recommendations would be directly from him. So we want to give him a little time to review this. But again, his staff have been working on it for 18 months, and so I assume he's going to feel pretty closely aligned with them, but he might have another opinion.
So since we don't want to go through this in great detail right now, I'll just list out my questions here. Let's see. So on page 4, it's in the big bold section 5. It says, for street design criteria not listed within these regulations, the designer shall utilize the latest editions of the Green Book, the ITE manual, and then other design documents subject to the approval of the city jurisdictional engineer. And I'm just curious, what is the process for those design documents being added? What kind of notice is going to be provided? And even what is the intent? Is this just to allow design engineers to suggest a manual? Say I'm designing a project and I'm going by some manual not included here that I want to use. Can I use that as long as I have permission from the city engineer? This is just very vague to me, and I'm a little nervous about it.
Yeah. So we added this directly because there were requests for additional unspecified manuals to potentially be used for that. We have not yet worked through the exact process that would go through the approvals. I think the pre-submittal process would be a good place for that to start happening. If you have specific ones that either you or if there are others that know they want, we are certainly open to that. We want there to be an openness to other design manuals, but did not want to specify those in advance.
Right. So what I'm getting at, if a design engineer wants to bring a new manual, I think it's good that the language leaves room for that. What I would not like to see happen is the city engineer imposing a new manual, and there's no language here to say, 30 days notice or whatever, to say, okay, the city engineer has decided to use this new manual and every project has to comply with it. What is the process to let us know that that's the case? Because the way this is written seems to me that the city engineer could do that at any time without a vote from this body or without any.
He wouldn't be a
prior
very good
notice.
engineer if he was doing that.
I agree. I'd like to adjust the language a little bit.
My assumption, or what, again, I'm not Ross, the new city public works engineer, but I thought this was to say if a developer wanted to do something out of the box, they could bring a design document. It doesn't say a manual. They could bring an example of another community, I guess, or another project and bring that forward, and city engineer could consider that as, something that might want to allow. I mean, I guess that's what that is.
Okay, that's helpful. And I agree that is the intent that I was hoping this was written with. It just wasn't clear. Similar to the issue that Chris brought up, it's kind of difficult to read.
Sure.
The intent of that. Let's see.
I think, I don't know if anybody would care a lot if it's stricken now before this is adopted. I think, those are kinds of things that I would like.
Given the intent that you guys have spoken about, I'd rather leave it in.
Could it be clarified?
But I would rather clarify it before it comes to us. I mean, is there a chance to change it before August, or is the version we're seeing now the one we have to vote on? But if it can be changed before the August meeting to clarify just slightly, I think that would be helpful.
I think we can certainly work on that, just like with the previous one about the 30 days.
Exactly.
I think we can work on some language to clarify what that is, just like you're saying, our intention is what you were identifying.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah, thank you. I've got two more real quick. Page 10, number 16, section B, for subdivisions located within the geographic area of the urban overlay, street connections shall be required to connect to any existing right-of-way stubs adjacent to the proposed development. And we had a long conversation about this in the design meetings. I know that under state law, we cannot require anyone to build a new stub, but we can require people to connect to existing stubs. And I'm wondering why we're only limiting this to the urban overlay.
One of the things that we heard repeatedly through this process was that requiring that in many cases presents perceived or actual hardships with adjacent developments or any other things. This was an attempt by us to limit the geographic areas within which that would happen, as well as limit this to areas where there's already a well-connected street grid that would benefit from additional street connections.
Okay, because it's my opinion that if we're trying to create additional connections anywhere, it should be where there are not currently connections. So it seems a little counterintuitive to me. That is just my opinion as one commissioner, and I'll just leave that be for right now. And then the last question is about the street slopes that I know are going to be an issue. And I know it's an issue with the fire code. I know it's an issue with how we can vary from the fire code and what that process needs to look like. And this is where I wish we almost had a city attorney in the room, but if we as a commission recommend something, because this stops with us, if I'm not mistaken. Once we approve the subdivision regs, they are the subdivision regs. Whereas the street slopes are guided by the fire code, which is adopted by the city council. So do we need to get a variance from the city council to say by ordinance, because the city council can override the fire code and they've made local amendments. Is that the route we need to take to, as a body, recommend that the city council approve a local amendment to street slopes? Or can we just change it in the subdivision regs?
We can, this planning commission approves subdivision regs. The fire marshal has the authority to make variances to things that are under the jurisdiction of the fire marshal. They're kind of independent, I guess. So,
so you have to clear the planning commission test.
Well, I would
and
clear the fire marshal first.
Yep.
If
Right.
I were you.
You have to clear them both.
Yep.
And if one is set higher than the other, that's something that needs to be worked out. So we can approve something independently of the fire marshal is what I'm hearing. Okay. That's all my questions.
I think I would hear, we had heard throughout this process a few sticking points with the IFC. And I think the document as it is being proposed is reflective of the IFC, but if the IFC or the local amendment was to change, we certainly would want the subdivision regulations to follow that. So I think that is a potential that it may change in the future, and if it did, we would adjust from there.
Let me just add a comment. That's basically so the documents are consistent. I mean, I think it's important to talk about. Currently, our subdivision regulations don't match the fire code, but the fire code supersedes, because you're correct. It's jurisdictional with the fire marshal, and it goes to county commission. They adopt the fire code. So I think it's probably staff's, trying to get the documents consistent. But you're absolutely right. We could set this as whatever subdivision regs, but I don't think the fire marshal would sign a plat or sign a development plat if it was contrary to the fire code.
And I think part of the reason for including them in here is that that's what we were hearing. There was a desire to have a more explicit enumeration of what those were. It does create conflicts like this. Instead of just listing, go to IFC to see what this is. Enumerating that was something that we heard was a desire.
If we can get to a point where, and maybe we don't get to this point, maybe it's a moot point, but if we can get to the point where the fire marshal is comfortable with 12% by right, just across the board, he doesn't want to keep getting my phone calls and emails saying, hey, can you approve this 12%? Hey, what about this one? What about this one? And if the whole engineering community is blowing up his email and phone, asking for the same thing over and over again, maybe he's just happy with it. And maybe we can be happy with it as planning commission and we can just change it so it's done by right. I mean, that's what I'm getting at. and what I would like to see. I realize it might not be possible because it's not just up to us, it is up to the fire marshal.
I think that also it shows the value in looking at, as Dan's saying, on a monthly basis or a regular basis. Like what are those points? So that if that is something that we are seeing on a recurring basis, we know and can also work with the fire marshal at that point to try to work through this issue.
I know Eric's wanting to go through it line by line. I was trying to hold him off. I think it's pretty self-explanatory what's in here. I mean, there's, if anybody individually, I think we're not allowed to get planning commissioners together in groups outside of this, but if anybody individually wants to sit down, we have 30 days. We will go through it with you anytime between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m., not including weekends. Seriously, go through it with you, help you understand it. If planning commissioners want to offer amendments in the next couple of weeks via email, and we'll check those out and we can talk. But I mean, I just want us to be very actively trying to move towards adopting this next month. And I think Chairman Collier would ask the same, because we've just been working on it a long time. We just need to put a stake in the ground and then move from there forward and keep making tweaks to it. So.
Okay, well, I would challenge the commission then to look through it and then meet with staff or send questions. And then let me just be clear, though, that we can offer amendments, changes based on motions. I mean, I know that can get very difficult with a document this complex and this, but if we ask enough questions over the next 30 days, I would sort of agree. Let's get a document that's maybe not perfect, but is better than not having one, and then we can deal with it on a month to month going forward. And this body may be the most appropriate to continue to look at it, just like we did with what's the thing we just did, the form-based code. Yep. Thank you.
Feel free to send anything to myself, to Eric, to Chairman Collier, and we'll get that vetted and sent out to everybody else, whatever needs to happen.
We've got one last question for you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
And you may not know because you might not be sitting in that chair next month, but do you know procedurally how we're going to be moving through this document? Are we going to take it as a whole, or are we going to take it section by section?
I would prefer to we have a better draft. If you have comments or things you want to change, I would ask that we try to submit those in the next couple of weeks, so we can, if there's some trying to figure out if Chairman Collier supports it, and if there's, then we can try to get as close as we can to just approving a new document or whatever it is. I mean, I don't want to try to go through this and make amendments on the fly next month. I don't think y'all do either. But we'll get as close as we can to a final document if that's possible.
And the reason I'm asking is because there are amendments that we might want to make as a planning commission that maybe aren't presented in the document next month. And so I'm wondering what that process would look like. Would we adopt the document as a whole and take amendments?
I would submit those in advance to Chairman Collier.
Okay.
Councilman.
Any versions that come before commission that have been changed from the document that we have, make sure you label them as alternate versions. So that way we can keep track of them, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, approval, we need to approve our minutes. Okay, I have a motion second. All those in favor say aye. Motion carries. Mr. Payne, we are adjourned. Thank you.